Meet Gnocchi. She's adorable, right? People usually smile when they see her. From a distance, she looks like pure joy. But living with her is a very different experience. She needs to be walked every day, not when it's convenient, but when it's necessary. She needs rules, consistency, and attention. If I ignore her, even for a short time, she doesn't become calm, she becomes creative. And I think this is something we all know, whether it's with pets, relationships, or communities. Things that look good from outside don't take care of themselves. What keeps them healthy is boring, repetitive, everyday work. Well, democracy is like a corgi. It looks adorable from afar, but if you don't actively care for it, chaos is guaranteed. You cannot leave it alone and hope it behaves. Well, still, when it comes to democracy, many of us have this idea that it is something that can be admired from a distance. Today, I want to explore what happens when we treat our democracy like a pet we've forgotten to feed, and what we can do right now to change that. This talk isn't about telling you what to think politically. It's about something way more basic, caring about the system that shapes our everyday lives. Let's be honest, most of us are turned off by politics, right? I mean, it's noisy, it's complicated, it's full of shouting and scandals. So we scroll past it, we mute it, we say, I'm not political. And I think this comes from a deeper belief we've absorbed over time. We've been taught to think that democracy is something we have, not something we do. But here's the truth. You can ignore politics, but politics never ignores you. It doesn't care whether you're bored by it. It still decides your taxes, what's legal in your country. It still decides your healthcare, what your children can learn in school. So when we say I'm not into politics, what we're really saying is I'm willing to let others make decisions for me without knowing who they are, how they decide, or whether I can hold them accountable. The moment we step away from politics, politics steps away from us. And that distance grows. And in that space, authoritarianism thrives. Not because people want dictatorship, but because they feel nothing they do will change anything. So, today, instead of telling you to get into politics, I want to explore what happens when we change our relationship with it. Because here's something important. Most of the time, the distance comes from something else. We don't stay out of politics because we don't care. We stay out of politics because we feel powerless. But what if politics was not a thing reserved for experts? What if it was a shared responsibility, like pet care? Let me show you how that looks like, starting in a classroom. When I teach politics to university students, I always start with a simple question. Who here thinks that politics has nothing to do with your daily life? Usually around half of the class raises their hands. So I set up a simple simulation. I divide the class into 3 groups, each with a very different level of resources and power. One group gets almost all the food and land and the legal right to make decisions for everyone. Second group has some resources, but no real power. Third group gets almost nothing. No land, no food, no say. Then I tell them, you just washed up on a shore. Now decide how to share what you have. I walk away for a minute, and when I come back, there are protests, alliances, sometimes even revolutions. Suddenly, no one wants to be apolitical. You know why? Because now there's something at stake. People don't avoid politics because they don't care. They avoid it because they don't feel connected to it. But once politics becomes personal, it becomes alive. And that connection, that's the heart of democracy. Not elections, not institutions, but people knowing that they matter. And it's not just true in classrooms. Let me show you how that works in real life, when people rise up and when they don't. In 2003, Georgia, my home country, had a peaceful revolution known as the Rose Revolution. It wasn't led by generals or elites. It was led by students, by NGO workers, by shopkeepers, ordinary people who believed that corruption was not inevitable, that democracy was something they were entitled to use, not just observe. And within weeks, the whole government stepped down. The real impact came later, in everyday lives. It showed up in things that now feel normal but weren't before, like a generation entering universities without bribes, people speaking freely without lowering their voices, young people like me growing up believing that opportunity didn't depend on connections, but on effort. That's what happens when citizens show up, not overnight politics, but everyday freedoms. But we all know that there's another way this story can go, right? And we're witnessing it right now in many countries across the world. People tune out, they feel tired, they feel nothing will change anyway, so they step back. And in that silence, disinformation spreads, trust collapses, and the system becomes less democratic, not through violence, but through quiet resignation. No modern dictatorship starts with tanks. It starts with people saying, let someone else handle it. Across democracies, political scientists and democracy watchdogs observe the same pattern. When participation drops, trust collapses, and simple answers start winning. Well, so how do we change that? How do we build the belief that democracy isn't something done to us, but something we shape? Let me give you another example from my classroom. For the past several years, I've been teaching basics of politics and democracy, not just to university students, but to high school students as well. Most of them had never had that kind of class in school. But once they really understand how it works, I see something shift. They began to see themselves in the system. When 17-year-olds learn what rights they actually have, they start asking better questions. Questions like, wait, who decided this? Why wasn't I told? And what can I do about it? When university students understand how elections work, they stop complaining and start campaigning. When adults realize that democracy is a daily practice, not a 4-year event, they get involved. It's not about making everyone a politician. It's about making no one a bystander and to understand the simplest truth. Democracy isn't about who is in power. It's about who feels they have power. So, how do we walk, feed, and train our democracy just like we do with the corgi? I've got 3 rules for you. First of all, stay curious. Ask questions. Don't just vote, understand why you're voting. Ask yourself, how will this benefit me and the country? Who pays the costs? But it's not enough just to vote. We should realize that democracy doesn't just happen on election day. It happens in everyday practice. It happens in community meetings, school boards, student councils, and at the conversations in the dinner table when something feels unfair and you don't let it slide. But that actually works if people participate. When we don't show up, when we assume that someone else will handle it, then democracy starts to fall asleep. So second rule is pretty simple. Don't snooze, show up. But even when we show up, democracy still depends on something else, the information we rely on. In today's world, political messages don't just spread through newspapers or speeches. They travel instantly through notifications, headlines, and social media feeds. And the messages that travel the fastest are often the ones that make us emotional. That's where another risk appears, disinformation. Disinformation is intentionally misleading information designed to shape how we think or react. In a way, disinformation is to democracy what sugar is to dogs. It satisfies quickly, but it's not built for health. So before sharing anything, especially if it makes you furious, pause, check the source, ask yourself, who wants me this angry? Because democracies don't collapse overnight. They weaken slowly when we stop feeding them with attention, care, and truth. And there's one more lesson Gnocchi has taught me. Gnocchi would absolutely love it if I gave her a chocolate cake or entire bag of kibble all at once. She would be thrilled. She would think I'm the best parent in the world. And she would also get sick. Because caring isn't about giving her what she wants in the moment, it's about giving her what she needs in the long run. And that's where democracies often get in trouble. They depend on patience, and patience is hard. When people feel frustrated, unheard, or disconnected, they become more receptive to the messages that offer clarity instead of complexity. Some political messages respond to that frustration by simplifying the story, dividing society into ordinary people and corrupt elites, and suggesting that complicated problems have quick fixes. Political scientists call this style of messaging populism. At its core, populism frames politics as struggle between the people and the elite and suggests that these complicated issues have easy fixes. In most cases, those fixes, those responses rely on quick emotional satisfaction rather than on a long-term institutional health. So in a way, some populist rhetoric can work as political junk food. Just like junk food, it offers some soothing. It feels good, it feels satisfying. It offers some clarity in a confusing world. One group is to blame. One leader will fix everything. There's a simple answer, trust me. Just like with the junk food, the problem isn't temptation. The problem is eating without thinking. Responsible citizenship, like responsible care, means slowing down, asking who benefits from this, who pays the costs, and does this actually solve the problem or just feels good right now? Democracy doesn't stay healthy by being indulged. It stays healthy by being balanced, measured, and cared for, even when that's hard. The same way I have to measure Gnocchi's kibble to keep her healthy, we have to measure our decisions as citizens to keep our democracy healthy. And that brings me back to where we started. So if you remember nothing else today, let it be this. Democracy isn't a machine. It's a living being. It breathes when we participate. It deteriorates when we stop. It doesn't need you to love politics. It needs you to care enough not to leave it starving. Because democracy doesn't die when it's attacked. It dies when it's abandoned. It needs us, not just to vote, but to care. Thank you.